Top of the day to you all, and welcome to Module 11 of PD 5202. The last time we met, we discussed Module 10, which was on curriculum development. We talked about the meaning of curriculum development, the factors influencing curriculum development. We talked about curriculum designs. We talked about the elements of curriculum. Today, we shall be talking about the history of curriculum development in Nigeria. Before the coming of the colonial masters and the missionaries, Africans, they had their own unique way of training. Not only the young ones, but also the adults. The most interesting aspect of it was that the education was not an end or for mere certification without assurance of being employed. The educational enterprise was very, very effective and goal-oriented. However, this curriculum operated before colonial era and the missionary era in Africa was termed informal curriculum. It is to the credit of the missionary and the Western education was introduced into Nigeria in the 17th century. So when you want to talk about the history of curriculum development in Nigeria, you can look at it from three angles. That is, the missionary era, the colonial era, and the post-independence, or you can say later development. Now, what do we call the missionary era? This era was the era the Methodist mission established the first schools in Badagry in 1843. And the primary intention of the missionaries was evangelization and Christianization of the Haitian Africans. Their major aim of coming to Africa per se and Nigeria was to teach the indigenes how to read and write so that they could be made use of as catechists and interpreters in order to preach the gospels to our people. So the urgent needs of the African proficiency in the reading of the Bibles and their needs of lettered Africans who will serve as catechists, interpreters, etc. were motivating and sustaining factors. So the motivating factors behind the establishment of schools by the missionaries was to, like I said, to teach our people how to read and write in English language so that they could be made use of as catechists, interpreters, and what have you. So as a result of this, the curriculum were predominantly Bible reading, catechism, hymns, prayer, sewing for girls, and farming for boys. So they were not interested in introducing subjects or coming up with curriculum that will be able to produce the type of children that will be able to contribute their own quota to the development of Nigeria. We now move on to the colonial era. The abolition of slave trade stimulated the white merchants to look inward to Africa with legitimate trade. Hence, colonial powers engaged in trading activities in Africa to source for raw materials to develop their own industries. The colonial interest began to be noticeable in 1882 when an education ordinance was put in place, which was to serve as regulatory tools for schools in British West African countries like the Gold Coast, which we call Ghana this day, the Sierra Leone, the Gambia, and Lagos colony. You see, like the missionaries, the colonial masters also, their major interest then was to teach English language, to teach our people how to read and write in English language, because they did not understand our language, and our ancestors also did not understand their language. So they need to teach our people how to read and write in English language so that they can use them as interpreters or as the attendants in their various shops and merchandise companies. So they also the type of curriculum they were using then also include subjects like scripture, Greek, Latin, reading, writing, English, music, mathematics, philosophy, recitation. They were the predominant subject then. And you agree with me that these are not the subject that will produce the kind of children that can contribute their own quota to the development of our great nation. Let's now look at the later developments. Later developments. What do we have there? Under later developments, we have later developments. Yes, I said the colonial interest began to be noticeable. Yes, I think we have mentioned that. In March 1952, an indigenous examination body was created for the British West African countries. Grammar schools were naturally inclined to teach subjects being examined by the West African Examination Council. Till date, WAEC exercises enormous control over the depth and structure of the school curriculum at secondary school level. In order to cater for the future needs of increasing prospective school enrollment, Hashmi Commission was put in place. The report of the committee stimulated the establishment of higher institutions in Nigeria. Eventually, the first National Conference on Curriculum took place in November 1969, and the subsequent event that took place after that National Conference was the seminar that was organized in 1969, and the essence of that seminar is to look at the report of the National Conference, and the report of that National Conference was examined at that seminar, and a national policy on education was born out of that seminar, and that the national policy on education was introduced in 1973. And that national policy talks about Nigerian children spending 5 years at the secondary school, 6 years at the primary school level, 5 years at the secondary school level, then 4 years at the tertiary institution level. And that policy was started 654, which I think many of you are old enough to experience that. Spending 6 years at the primary school, then class 1 to 5 secondary school, then 4 years at the tertiary institution level. And before this time, they have already reviewed our curriculum, and then interesting subjects that could lead to the development of our nation were introduced, like political science, economics, social studies, history, physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, etc. And their scopes were widened. After the introduction of those interesting curricula, they were being developed on several occasions in order to make sure that the happenings outside our country and outside Africa are factored into the development in order to get the desired results. Then the outcome of the seminar was the modification of the 1969 conference paper and the adoption of national policy on education. This national policy on education has been reviewed several times, and we now have what is called 6334. That is, a child spends 6 years in primary school, 3 years at the junior secondary school, 3 years at the senior secondary school, and then minimum of 4 years at the tertiary institution level. And the essence of this is to make sure that the curricula are robust enough I made a sample of the integrated science. When it was 654, it was general science. When the curriculum was reviewed and developed, and we now have what is called 6334, the idea of integrated science, of general science, was jettisoned, and it now became integrated science. And textbooks for teachers and students were developed to cater for junior secondary school 1, 2, and 3. With this, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the brief history of curriculum development in Nigeria. Until when we meet next to to discuss about Unit 2 of Module 11, which will be about the agencies of curriculum development. Do have a great day.